As your life goes through its various transitions, the original or current purpose of a room may not always make sense. But repurposing a room may seem a daunting task. In this podcast, I chat through how I changed everything around once my son moved out to uni.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here are your hosts, Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome, listeners. I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Leslie.
If you're new to the Declutter Hub podcast, you're so welcome. What you'll find is that we try and find a fun factor in the serious business of decluttering. And if you've been here for a while, you know exactly what we mean. So thank you so much for listening.
If you'd like to get involved in conversations relating to this podcast, it all takes place in our Facebook group. So come and join our lovely, warm, supportive community. To find the Facebook group, go to declutterhub.com/group to find out more, or you can search for the Declutter Hub community on Facebook.
Well, Leslie, here we are talking about how 2024 has been quite a year for me and how lots has changed in my house. And I feel a bit like, oh, I'm being interviewed by you.
You looked a little bit wistful there when you did the intro, actually. And understandably so, because we're talking about transitions. And one of the big transitions that happened to you this year was that Max left home, he's 18 years old, and went abroad, actually, back over to Holland to go to university in Delft, which left you with a big gaping hole in your house where his room once was. And you made the very, very brave decision to kind of get rid of his room and use it for something different. I'm trying to think of a kind way to say it, but basically. So we're going to talk through that a little bit. But before we do, Ingrid, let's talk about the types of transitions that happen in people's lives that might mean that they want to repurpose something.
I think there's loads of things that impact how you set up your house or how you need to make changes. I mean, if I even look at my own life, when I had the children, spare bedrooms and guest rooms suddenly were turned into nurseries and kids' rooms. At one point, we had to, because Anne had a tiny room, which is now my office, which I'll tell a little bit more about later, but she had to have a desk. So we had to kind of configure our living room a little bit and put in an extra desk so she could work as well. Everything changes all the time. People who used to work in the office suddenly were realizing that they wanted to work from home or had to work from home. So at home, suddenly home offices need to be created. So change, involves also making probably changes at home.
Yeah, I think, the transitions that sort of spring to mind for me, and obviously, as you rightly said, there was a huge transition in the pandemic where everybody started working from home, and that's now here to stay for so many people. So that was a big transition in terms of repurposing rooms. I think, kids coming and going is another big one. As kids come into your life, as they start to grow. I mean, I had like a playroom here, which is now the office that I'm sitting in, because I didn't need a playroom anymore. And then, of course, as we go sort of further down the line, sometimes we have elderly parents moving in. Sometimes our kids that left move back, for shortly or forever. We've got the transition of partners getting divorced or splitting up. We've got, or losing a partner. There are so many transitions in life which may make you evaluate the space that you've got and whether it's being used for the right purpose at the moment. So I think the one thing that I would say is that there's a lot of emotional response to all of those things. If we think about all the things that we've mentioned, with the exception of maybe working from home, which is less emotional, they all involve people, and where people are involved, then emotions are involved. And so before we even get to a point of the practicalities of transitioning or repurposing a room, we really need to be ready, don't we, Ingrid? So let's talk about Max moving out. It's been a few months now, so let's talk about that. So how ready were you for him to move out? And how easy was it for you to then let go of his personal space?
I think it's been a process, Leslie, for sure. I mean, to be really honest, I found the year before he left for uni very hard. I think I really struggle with the fact that both the kids are growing up and that they just, and of course, I've always raised them to be independent and to be ready and to make sure they are good, solid adults. You do your best, right? But I think suddenly the thought that he wasn't going to be here anymore, it really, really was hard on me. I struggled with it a lot. You know this. We haven't talked about this a lot at all, really, but it was really tough for me. And of course, on top of that, I really struggled with my dad passing away as well this year. And on top of that, I really was kind of thrown into menopause as well. So all of the things kind of coming together kind of created a bit of a perfect storm. And the thought of him leaving was really hard. And I was very emotional about it. I really, because I think we had such a lovely family with the four of us. We really love hanging out together. We do a lot of stuff together. We love traveling together and playing board games and just watching TV, just the normal things that I think it's nothing extraordinary, but it's just really nice to be as a family. And I think just the thought that it would suddenly become three was really overwhelming to me. I think also because he was studying abroad, he's back in Holland, where I'm originally from. That was not such a problem for me because we go to Holland all the time. I didn't go like, oh my gosh, he's off to Holland, I will never see him again, because we still have, we've seen him. We've been back twice already. We'll see him again for, this upcoming Christmas. So that's all good. But I think it's more of the unknown. Finding a room in Holland is very, 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 very difficult because there's a lot of people on a very small piece of land. So you need to really, it's tricky. So that worried me a lot as well. But Max himself from the start said, Mom, I'm leaving for uni. What are you going to do with my room? And I, of course, my first instinct was to say, well, we're going to keep your stuff. And he was like, well, why would you do that? And I went, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm not going to be here. So are you guys going to, because in Holland, the uni year is 40 to 42 weeks of the year. So here it's a lot less in the UK. So kids come and go all the time. But in Holland, out of the 52 weeks, they go to school like 40 or 42 weeks and then have to study on top of that. So he was like, so why are you keeping a room for me? Because the time that I'm off, I'm either studying in my own room or I'm hopefully traveling a little bit if I'm lucky. So I can just go into the guest room when I come home. You don't need to keep a whole room for me. You've been in the guest room with your office for 5 years since the pandemic started. And I really, really want you to have a nice space because I know how much you work. I know how much you need to record and film and all of that. So actually, he was the one who suggested it. And I was a bit more like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on a minute. But he was like, seriously, Mom, I really want you to think about that. And I think it's a really good thing for you if you get your own office. And that kind of got the ball rolling. So it was him more than me that kind of got the seed planted. And then when I kind of started to think about it, I thought, you know what, it does make sense to do a swap around. And then that was kind of the start of it all.
I think it's an interesting, the whole 42 weeks and being in Holland, which is your home country, is a slightly unusual sort of circumstance. I mean, obviously a lot of unis go for prolonged periods of time, not like, my kids are kind of back before they've left, like back, because I kept saying, oh, they'll be back all the time. My kids were kind of home like 5.5 months out of 12. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So you feel like they're going. And I think it is very hard work. And particularly when your first child leaves home, it's a real wrench, and that whole emptiness. And I was sobbing and I was like kind of preempting it to you and sort of saying, it's not nice. But then once they go and then they come back with this kind of renewed kind of sense of independence and annoyance and kind of been all independent and think they know everything, you're like, okay, you can go back now. Literally, bye. I thought it was sad, but now just off you trot back to where you came from. And so you kind of get over it quite quickly. But And I think there are, Nathan's just left home for the last time. So he's left uni now and he's gone down to London. So he's gone. So I've had that going on again. But it's sort of, it's an interesting one, Ingrid, because even though Max is over in Holland and you would expect him to then come home, he would come home at the times when you're going to Holland, like, because you go over, so you go over at Christmas. And so the chances are he's going to be on family holidays like you always were. So he's home even less than he ordinarily would be. And so it's really interesting that the sort of practical side of Max, I'm sure he's a chip off the old block then, came into play and sort of said, doesn't make any sense. And actually, when you get over it, you've got to get over that emotional wrench first, haven't you?
Because I always, how like practical and things. So I kind of thought, this empty nest syndrome, oh yeah, I'll cry. Oh my gosh, it's really taken the wind out of my sails a couple of times where it's really like, wow, I have underestimated it. And the funny thing is that some of my friends who've got boys and girls the same age, they're gone. They're all like, oh, they're gone. And I'm fine. I'm like, I'm so happy now for him. He's got a room. He's living his best life. He's made lots of friends. He's doing well. He has us in stitches because he's like, I have to cycle everywhere. I'm so tired, which we think is hilarious because that's what we do in Holland. You cycle everywhere. So he's really like, the reason why he wanted to go to Holland is because he really wanted to live there, because although he feels Dutch, he's never lived in Holland. So that was the whole reason. He was like, I really want to live there and see how the culture is and what it's like. And he's picking up on that. And it makes me just so immensely proud to see him and do all the things and make mistakes and move on. But with the language, and it's a lot to take in, and of course they don't have halls. A lot of students here in the UK, they live in like halls and they still can have a canteen where they can get food and stuff. But Max is in a room by himself. Okay, it's a student flat with lots of little one room apartments, but he's got his own little kitchen, his own little bathroom, so he has to shop and cook and do laundry and change beds and clean. And he had me laughing so hard because he rang me one day and he said, like, Mama, how do I clean my bathroom? Because you told it to me, but I didn't write it down and now I don't know the order. And I'm like, I'm so proud of him, you know what I mean? But I'm happy for him now. But gosh, I really wish I could be a bit more positive than last year, because it had me all kinds of kind of thoughts. And it was, the whole emptiness syndrome was much bigger than I anticipated. And you try to warn me, of course, and I do listen to you, but I think it's so different for everybody and how you respond to things. You don't know until you don't know. And now he's there, he's fine, he's thriving, he's doing well, he's going clubbing in Amsterdam, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to know. Please be careful.
So there's obviously, I think we can't underestimate the emotional response to that, I think is what we're saying, particularly if it involves people leaving.
Yeah.
To me, because you do want to kind of, it's a natural human response to want to sort of safeguard that a little bit and not to let those memories kind of evaporate overnight. And so, we can be forgiven for keeping hold of rooms for longer than perhaps would be considered to be rational, then let's call it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we've got pragmatic mum, we've got pragmatic son, and he goes, oh, Mum, change the rooms. So then we had Anne coming into the mix, right? Because it was like, well, it makes perfect sense for Anne to then move into Max's room, because I think Max had the bigger room, right? And Anne had a smaller room. And Anne was like, oh, no, I don't know whether I want to, wasn't she? So she was reluctant, wasn't she, at first?
Yeah, it was. I asked her like several times, like, Anne, would you like to move into Max's room? Because it's bigger, it's on the back of the house. You can really have maybe even put a little desk in or a chair, or all your furniture will fit a little bit better. She had a tiny box room. I mean, a bed, tiny bookcase, little trolley. That's what we're talking about, tiny. And she was like, no, happy as Larry in my little room. I don't want to move. She doesn't like change a lot. And I'm like, okay,
he's another chip off the old block.
I know. I'm happy where I am. Don't move me. But she did say already for a while, she really wanted to change her room up because it was still very pink. And she's like, I'm kind of over this whole pink situation. Oh, she still likes pink, but not pink walls, pink curtains, pink everything. So I said,
She wouldn't
right,
like
well,
my room then, would she?
I
Very
know.
pink here. Very pink.
So we kind of said, well, so I said to her, well, why don't we need to think about a plan, how we're going to do this. And I said, you don't need to decide now if you want to move to Max's room. Even my sister got involved. I was like, are you sure? Anne doesn't want to move to the bigger room. And I'm like, I've asked her like 7 times, not like in one night, over time, because I want her to give her the option. I don't want her to feel pressured, because she's also started a new school with new friends. And so I thought, she's got enough on her plate. If she doesn't want to move, I'm not going to force her. I mean, I'm happy wherever. If I go into Max's room, Anne's room, I'm good, whatever happens. And then we had a whole conversation. I sat her down and I was like, okay, right, let's talk this through a little bit. What would you like? And she said, I'm really not sure. I said, well, okay, I have a plan. I said, Max's room needs to be painted like your room. So why don't we paint Max's room, give it a bit of a freshen up? Because whether I move in or you move in, it needs to be painted. Then when your room gets painted, you need to move in there anyway, so you can move up your stuff. So you have a week or week and a half when that's painting your room to decide if you like it. And if you want to move back, you move back, because we're going to have to move things anyway. And if you're happy as Larry, you stay in there, and then I move into your room. And that's exactly what happened. So I didn't kind of ask her to decide within like 2 days. I gave her time to get her head around it, because these are big decisions, right? Especially for her with a lot of change going on. I didn't want to put that pressure on her. And in the end, once the curtains went up in Max's old room, which is now her room, and once we got a rug, and once we got she was like, I actually really like it here. Can I stay? And I'm like, you do you. If you want to stay, that's fine. And if that's now the deal, and then I knew I could move into her room, because that was painted then as well. So it's been a lot of carrying furniture back and forth, Leslie. That's the truth.
So let's go to a break now. So we talked about the emotional connection to moving rooms, because it is quite big, with these transitions that go on in life. So we're going to go to a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about the practical matters of repurposing a room.
Well, welcome back to part 2 of how to repurpose rooms in your home. And I'm feeling like I'm being interviewed by Leslie. I like it. I could just sit here and tell my story, Leslie.
Oh, there's many things I could interview on that are not available for public broadcast. Shall I tell everybody what you were talking about before we came online? So Ingrid was like, I need to paint my hair. I'm like, I'm sorry. I need to paint my hair. And then she went, oh, I mean, dye my hair. So she's got some grays bobbing through.
I know.
So the Dutch word for dye your hair is indeed
paint. Yeah,
paint.
verven, which means paint. So I always say the wrong thing. I never say dye my hair. I also need to paint my hair. So my family knows it, but Leslie finds it very funny.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, let's talk about the practical matters. So, so we've got a scenario where, in a nutshell, the spare room is quite a big room in your house. You had a desk in there, but yet there was also a bed and laundry and all that kind of stuff, and laundry. Then we've got Max's room, who had like the sort of medium-sized bedroom, and had a box room. So Anne's happy in Max's room, which is a bigger one. So you're now in the box room, and that is where your office is, where you are sitting right now if you're watching us on YouTube. So what did we need to consider from a practical perspective when we were doing these moves? Because that's actually 3 rooms being impacted, right?
Yeah. So it all started with, of course, what's going to happen with Max's stuff, because that's where it started. And Max was still in one of those desk bed, kind of with a high bed with a desk below it situation. And we were like, whatever happens, if he even comes back as an 18-year-old, we're not going to let him climb up a ladder to go into a bed. So like whatever we're going to do.
8-year-old man going up a ladder to bed. Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, that we're past it. But we tried to change his bed before, but he really liked having his desk. So it's like, well, then the room is not big enough to have a separate desk and a separate bed. So that was the first thing. Like, okay, where's all the stuff going to go? So Max and I helped him, because this was like a big thing. So we actually went through it in different phases. So we looked at his clothes one session. It's like I'm talking with the client, but we did like a session on clothes. We did a session on like all of his books and things like that. And we did a session on all of the other, oh my gosh, so much other stuff. And we actually kind of basically made 3 different piles. Things he was going to take with him to Holland, things he was going to would want to declutter and could be donated, and things that were sentimental to him, and that had to go into my loft. So and Max also is an absolutely avid Lego fan, and we all agreed as a family Lego is non-negotiable. We will not declutter that from this house. So lots of that stuff all went in the loft. So it involved buying boxes, it involved labeling, it involved decluttering and donating stuff, it involved putting the bed on oleo, and people said, well, why don't you sell it? And I'm like, this bed has done such a good job. It was not expensive at the time. I would like to really make somebody else. So we put it on Oleo, a free giveaway site, and it was snapped up. The mattress had to go to the recycling center because that was done, finished. So his office chair was broken. So we brought that to so it was like a lot of like just decluttering first to make space. And then that room was empty. So it could then be painted and done up. So my husband was involved then, and he was like doing all of that. And while that happened, we started to think about, okay, when are we going to move Anne over? So when that room was ready, we then moved Anne over into that room with her bed and her little bookcase and her little trolley, and kind of went, okay, does the room look now? And I had my eye on Max's bookcase, a little bookcase from IKEA that I really like, but I was like, I'm having that as well. I went, oh, okay, all right, fine, you keep that, because she had a whole plan of how she wanted that room to look, and it looks lovely. And I also then swapped over some light fittings and some curtains, because the ones in Max's room are now in the guest room, and the ones from the guest room are now in Anne's new room, because it was better for the atmosphere of the room. It looked much better. So that was kind of phase 1.
And I think you have to think about these things really. If you repurpose a room, you've really got to think about how that's going to look, and if it's going to, so a curtain that might be good in a bedroom might not be good in an office, and all that kind of stuff. And I know that when you got to moving into Anne's old room, which is now your office, there were a lot of things that needed to be taken into consideration, because it is a completely different space to what you had. So explain a little bit about some of the things that you had to do. Were you expecting them? Were you not expecting them? Were there any curveballs that came your way?
So then Anne moved out, this room got painted, and I was like, right, I wanted to get a new desk, because the desk that I had was 20 years old, that we even had bought in Ireland when we lived in Dublin, and had survived like 3 or 4 house moves. And I was like, I really want to have a little bit more space. But I thought, let me be smart, because this room that I'm going to is not very big. So let me take my old desk with me, so I can just see how does the size work. Because a lot of mistakes that people make is when they go shopping, they buy furniture that is too big. You see it a lot with sofas, right? Leslie, we know this from example. People are in the shops and go, I love this sofa, but then don't think, does this actually work in my house? So I thought the same thing about my desk. I thought I want to put my old desk in, because that's not too big, but it's good enough. And I actually realized, wow, I can't really go for a much larger desk, because it won't fit. Then secondly, what we found out is that this room, the sound is completely different, because Anne only had a little blind, a rolling down blind. She didn't have curtains in her room, because it's a tiny room, and it has a wooden floor. And because of her bed took up so much space, she only had a tiny little square rug, but nothing big. So I realized that once we moved in and we were starting to record podcasts and lives, and it sounded really hollow. So you were like, you need to buy things. I'm like, I know. But I had to do everything in phases, right, Leslie? I had to get a new desk first, and then to do my setup. The lighting is different in this room. So I had to kind of make sure. So I actually went to IKEA. I got my new desk, and I got a sit-stand desk. So every once in a while, I can just press a button and my desk goes up, because we are behind the computer so much. I think it's really important that we think about our posture and our bodies as well. And every once in a while, when I'm like, oh, I'm getting a bit stiff, I just put my desk up and I have my standing desk. And then, so we did that first. And then I got bought a new little bookcase because I really wanted to get some stuff together that was in the guest room, downstairs in my living room cupboards. I wanted to get it all together. And I really wanted to get a new little display in my room. So Anne and I went to IKEA again and got this lovely display that is apparently originally for bathrooms, but we were like, this is perfect to display some bits that I have. And then the last phase was, okay, we have to look at the light and sound in this room. And that's when I got a rug, I got some curtains, and I got these really funny square sound absorbing cubes, and they actually look really nice. But yeah, it really helps with the sound. So it's been a work in progress. I still have one more thing to do, and it's that I want to get a new roller blind. But that might have to wait a couple of weeks until January, until I've got time to kind of look at that. So it's been a process.
And I think it's fair to say, Ingrid, that, you know, some of the things that have been an issue have been because we are kind of effectively using that office as a studio almost to record. Yeah. And so those things wouldn't be relevant to a lot of people if you were just repurposing something into your own personal office space or into a different bedroom and stuff. But, you know, it's important to think about lighting. It's important to think about what kind of curtains you're going to need. And are there, you know, if you've had curtains that let the light through, do you need blackout blinds if you're going to be sleeping in there? You need to think about the sound, because one of the other things that we've noticed as well, obviously, because, you know, and it is, as I say, because we're recording, Ingrid's now at the front of the house, and so it's a lot more noisy, so we can hear those ambulances going past every 5 minutes and stuff like that. So not a lot we can do about it, but we can hear it, right?
Yeah.
So you need to, these are the things that you need to factor in, you know. So even if you want, you know, if you want a good night's sleep, you know, is being at the back of the house the ideal scenario compared to the front of the house? You know, things like that are really, really important. You know, as Ingrid's mentioned, she's looked at lighting, she's looked at curtains, she's looked at storage and organization. She doesn't need that much storage in there, but she's just got more of a little display. But it's important to make sure that if you are repurposing a room, that you've got the right storage in place. She's thought about that in Anne's room as well. So all of these things need to be factored in. But it all starts, first of all, with that emotional response. And then it's all about trying to work out what the purpose of the room is and decluttering it. Because if you recreate a different room, a whole room is going. And so you need to think about where, you know, really, really important. You can't just go, I'm going to change that into an office if it was a bedroom. Where's all the stuff going to go that was in there in the first place? You know, and as Ingrid said, some of it went into donation. A few elements have gone up in the loft. Some of it's been given away. So there's, you know, and some of it's gone with Max. And so different sort of purposes. So you've got to really go through that whole process. And it's not something that you can do overnight, is it? It's something that's going to take time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me as well, that I got a little bookcase for this office as well. And I now, for the first time ever, have got all of my files and my paperwork and the things and my decluttering books, because I love reading decluttering books. So some of them are on display here. I've got more. But I've realized when I pull it all together, I was like, okay, I can actually declutter some of this stuff. I need to go through some of this stuff. I need to get rid of some of this stuff. I need to shred some of this stuff. So I've really done it in phases and done little bits and bobs over time, because these are big projects. And with our lives, you know, being full with everything that we do, you can't just go, well, you know, just one weekend and it will all be fine. This has been a process over several months. It's now the final tweaks and the final little bits and bobs that we still want to do. And it actually, this whole process has now prompted my husband to do much more painting, because we suddenly went, wow, these rooms look so nice. Maybe we should paint the guest bedroom as well now. And gosh, maybe the master bedroom needs a lick of paint, and the hallway really needs doing, and we need to do some in the kitchen. And so it's like almost, it's kind of made a snowball. And I've actually said over December, this month now, I don't want any DIY, because I want to focus on the holidays. I want to focus on, you know, on Christmas, on all of that. But I know for sure that in January it will start up again, and we'll do some more, because, you know, it's kind of, it's really given a fresh bit of energy to kind of go, okay, what do we need to fix and what needs to be repaired? And when a room is empty, it's like the perfect time to do this, you know, and think about electricity. Do you need to have some extra extension cords? What does make sense? Where can we move the furniture around, and all of these things?
I think it's really interesting actually, because I think, a lot of times when people come to us, certainly for one-to-one help in particular, they are overwhelmed with stuff. If you're in the throes of child rearing, and we all know what that is, we got kids between 2 and 10, for example, it can feel completely overwhelming with the volume of stuff and the amount of rooms that need to be taken up with said children. And then all of a sudden, as life kind of, we always say it gets better because the stuff starts to diminish a little bit. And then now what you can see in Ingrid's home, and Ingrid's got a lovely big home, but just by taking Max's room out of it, you can spread out that little bit more. It's exactly the same here, when in the pandemic, Luke had a bedroom upstairs, he moved out, he'd been gone a couple of years. And then Steve could then, Steve was in like a tiny little office downstairs with no window. Then all of a sudden, I'm like, you can't just stay there when you're working from home all the time. So he's gone up into Luke's bedroom. And again, it was emotional wrench. Luke's still kind of, I've not got a room to stay in. I'm like, Luke, you've moved out like 6 years ago. You don't need a room. And so, things like that. So it's really interesting. But I think if I were to think about the key messages that have come from the things you have said, Ingrid, I think first and foremost, it's about being ready for that, because you need to be completely committed to it, don't you, to be able to go through that process. Yeah. I think it's thinking about the decluttering side of things. So where is the stuff going to go if you're going to repurpose and effectively eradicate one room worth of stuff? And then thinking about a process that means that you've thought through the aesthetics, the lighting, the sounds, the implications, the furniture, all of those kind of things. And to take your time. This is not something you can, on a whim, wake up one morning and go, I'm going to move rooms around. This needs to be carefully planned and executed, doesn't it, Ingrid?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's key. And that's something I think that, because you underestimate how much, you got to know how much work it is, but you still underestimate it, how much time it costs to, take a bed apart, move it all across, putting it back together, and all of these things. And it's really, I think, really helped me to, pull open some. There's like some cupboards in the spare bedroom that have always been tricky to get into the last 4 or 5 years, because my desk was blocking those rooms. So now I'm getting ready to go, okay, actually, it's time now in the new year. I'm going to pull open some of these cupboards, have a relook at some of this stuff. I did some back in November that I was like, okay, and now I can actually open the doors. I got space to pull stuff out. So it's really, I think, shows that decluttering is something that you can break down. I did not do 3 full weekends or 3 full weeks. We've really broken it down in smaller chunks. Half an hour during the evening here. Oh, what's this file of paperwork? Let me look at that and just sort through it. Then over time, and it's really all falling into place now. So it's really, really lovely. And Max is excited to be coming home with us after Christmas. After we see him in Holland, he's going to come back with us for the new year. So it's fantastic, and he will be in the spare bedroom, and he is all fine with that. So yeah, exciting. It's really brought a kind of a new lease of life when you change stuff around, but it feels good now, and I think that's the most important thing. And I still miss him, though. I still miss him.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ingrid, for sharing your story. Did you like being interviewed by me?
Yes, I did. Actually, we need to do this more often.
I know. We need to think about something that you can interview me on. Anyway, right. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's everything.
Yes, I think so too. So listeners, have you thought about, has this podcast made you think? Have you thought to yourself, actually, does my current home work for me? Do the rooms all fit a purpose? Does it fit in with my current lifestyle and what I would like to have in my home? Or has it made you think, going, I need to actually repurpose some spaces. I want to do what Ingrid's done, and I'm going to take the new year. I'm going to do this. I need help decluttering and organizing. Just know our membership is here. If you need help with decluttering and organizing your home, that is why we set up the membership. And we've got everything you need: courses, advice, support, motivation in our membership to help you with this decluttering and organizing. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.